There is a kind of road in these mountains that turns smooth right before it turns wrong. You felt it, maybe, without knowing what you were feeling, a rise that comes too easy, a stretch where the birds stop, where the wind holds its breath instead of moving through the leaves. That stillness has a name in the hills of western North Carolina. The old families call it being let through. Before we go any further, tell me where you're listening from tonight. Just the town, the county, the patch of ground under your feet. I like to know where these stories land when the lights go down and the room goes quiet. This is Cursed America. And tonight's case has 3 dates stitched to it: 1843, when it began; 1893, when it was found; and 1955, when the last man willing to speak about it put down his pen and never picked it back up. 62 people are at the center of this. And one well, cut into the side of a valley that has never once appeared on a public map. If this is the kind of case you want to sit with, not one file, but 10, each pulled from a different county, a different decade, all of them closed with the wrong word by the men whose job it was to close them right, Cursed America has a full collection waiting. 10 hours. 10 places that shouldn't exist. Links below. Now let's go back to 1893. The autumn came late that year. Frost came at strange hours and never stuck, and the hardwoods along the ridge held their green 2 weeks past when they should have turned. Into that unfinished season, the Norfolk and Western Railway sent a surveyor named Ambrose Kane. 48 years old. Lean through the shoulders, weathered dark along the cheekbones, pale where his hatband sat. 15 years chaining lines through swampland and granite shelf had given him the kind of steadiness that doesn't spook easy. A man in an office in Baltimore had drawn a red pencil across a stretch of mountain he'd never laid eyes on, called it the Hollow Fork, and told Kane to walk it and report back whether track could be laid. Kane rode a hired wagon into a settlement so small it didn't appear on the railway's own survey charts, a place called Ashford Notch. 6 family names. Maybe 130 people, all descended from the same handful of Scots-Irish who'd walked in from the Yadkin Valley a century earlier and never found a reason to leave. They kept to themselves. Letters they'd sent the railway, in careful schoolhouse handwriting, had said as much, politely, but plainly. Kane took a room at the boarding house, ate a supper he didn't taste, and asked at the general store where he might hire a guide. The storekeeper didn't answer right away. Then, you on Eli Core. Past the mill, last house with a porch left standing. A pause. Don't tell him where you're headed before he agrees to take you. Eli Core was 54 and looked 70. Built like a stump, one eye gone milk white from an old accident he never explained. He was sitting on his porch with a rifle across his knees when Kane came up the path, and he watched him the way you'd watch a snake you hadn't decided yet whether to shoot. Along the porch rail hung a row of small wooden carvings, no bigger than a thumbnail, each cut with the same symbol, a circle, a line through its center, 3 shallow notches beneath. Kane didn't know what it meant. He understood, without being told, that it was a warning, and that Eli Core had spent a long time carving warnings. Kane explained the job. Eli listened without moving. When Kane finished, Eli said only, "Which ridge?" Kane showed him the map, the red pencil line running straight through a bowl of a valley. Eli studied it a long time. Then he said, "I'll take you as far as the fork above the old mill. No further. If I turn back, you turn back. That's the whole of it." Kane, who had never in his career taken terms from a hired hand, agreed anyway. Something in the old man's face made arguing feel like a mistake he wasn't willing to make twice. They left at first light. 2 hours in, Kane realized what was bothering him. There were no birds. No squirrels working the leaf litter. Not even flies. Eli walked ahead and didn't speak, except once, when Kane asked what lay north of the trail. "Shoulder of the Hollow Fork," Eli said. "How far does the valley run?" As far as it wants to. Not an answer Kane could put in a survey log. He wrote it down anyway. At noon they crossed a stream that didn't appear on any chart, running black tea dark over slate. Eli knelt, drank from it with his cupped hand, then stood and said, "Don't drink anything that runs off the north face of this ridge." "Why not?" "Because it doesn't come from a spring you'll ever find." When they reached the fork, Eli pointed downhill with the barrel of his rifle. Below sat the prettiest country Kane had seen all year, a wide gentle bowl, a silver creek, chestnuts so tall they looked painted onto the sky. "We camp here," Eli said. "Go down at first light. It isn't even noon. We camp here. A man doesn't walk into that valley in the afternoon. It's a rule." That night Kane slept badly. The fire burned down to a red coal heart that should have died by midnight and hadn't. Twice he woke certain someone had spoken his name. Once, near the deep hours, he heard a wagon pass on the trail, wheels on hard ground, the creak of an axle, a woman's voice, low, saying something he couldn't make out. He got up. Walked out with a lantern. Found the trail undisturbed, dust unbroken. Eli was awake, rifle across his knees. "You heard it." "I heard something." "Don't answer if it speaks to you again." He wouldn't say more than that. By daylight the valley was even more beautiful, and something underneath the beauty was wrong. Not silence exactly. Attended silence. The feeling of walking into a room where a conversation had just stopped. Kane found tracks along the creek bank that weren't deer, weren't bear, weren't anything with a name he knew, long, narrow, the toe running straight instead of turning. Eli, watching him crouch over them, said only, "Don't follow those." By mid-morning they reached the ruin of an old grist mill, fieldstone foundation, collapsed roof choked in ivy. On the south wall, cut deep into the stone, was the same mark from Eli's porch rail. Circle. Line. 3 notches. Means whoever cut it was warning the next man through, Eli said. Warning him of what? The fork past the mill. Which is where I stop. Kane worked alone through the afternoon, taking his readings, driving stakes, sighting his transit across the far ridge. Twice he glanced up and caught Eli staring past him into the trees, not watching Kane at all. Kane turned to look. Nothing there. That evening, climbing back out, Eli finally told him the story. Summer of 1843, Eli said. 9 wagons, 62 souls, bound for Kentucky out of the Piedmont. Man leading them called himself Josiah Merrick, preacher's son turned trader. They came through this town on a Sunday and wouldn't stop for service. Told the minister, Reverend Amos Toll, that they had a schedule. Reverend Toll told him plain, in front of the whole congregation, take the north road over the gap. It costs you a day and a half, but take it. The valley doesn't let travelers through in the fall. Merrick laughed at him. Said they weren't travelers, they were settlers, and settlers go where the ground is flat. Took his people down into the hollow fork that same afternoon. Nobody in this town ever saw one of them again. 2 weeks on, hunters walked that same valley chasing a bear track. Found nothing. No wagon ruts. No fire pits. No sign 62 people and 9 wagons had ever set foot there. Valley sat there clean and green like it had swallowed and licked its lips. Sheriff back then, man named Elias Barrow, went down himself, came back the same day, and wouldn't speak on what he saw. Wrote in his log that the party had continued west, 'cause of loss undetermined. Continued west. That's the phrase he used, and it was the wrong phrase, because they never came out of that valley at all. Families back east waited the legal 7 years and had their kin declared dead so the estates could settle. 3 separate hearings. Barrow testified at every one, same story, same lie, every time. Each time he walked straight out of that courthouse into the Reverend's church, and the two of them shut the door and didn't come out till evening. My father said Barrow cried every single time. Reverend Tull never cried. He prayed. Prayed every day from the afternoon those wagons went down till the day he died. The next morning Kane climbed to see Odessa Vane, 78 years old, the last living witness. She poured 2 cups of coffee before she'd say a single word. "You've been down in the Fork," she said. "I have." "What did it feel like?" Kane thought about it. "Like a room where someone just stopped talking." She nodded slowly. "That's exactly right. It's why I haven't gone down there myself since I was 15. She told him she'd counted them from the church steps, 9 wagons, 62 people, 40-some mules, a dozen goats, 2 dogs that turned back at the ridgeline and had to be dragged by the collar. She told him about the woman in the back of the last wagon, gray dress, white collar, who didn't laugh with the rest of them. Who looked at Odessa like she was trying to memorize her face for later. She leaned down as they passed, Odessa said, and pressed something into my hand. Said one sentence to me, and then she was gone down the road. What she'd pressed into a 15-year-old's palm was a carving no bigger than a thumb, circle, line, 3 notches. What she'd said was, if you grow old, and we come back for you, don't answer. Odessa still had it. Kept it in a box on the mantel, opened once a year to be sure it hadn't gone anywhere. "What do you think happened to them?" Kane asked. "I don't think anything happened to them," Odessa said. "I think they were taken." "By what?" "That's the part Reverend Tull knew and took to his grave in 1861. He asked to be buried on the far ridge, facing the valley. So he could watch it." She was quiet a long moment. "On certain nights, wind out of the west, moon sitting low, you can hear a wagon on the road below his grave. Wheels on hard ground. An axle creaking. A woman's voice, very low, saying something you can't quite catch." Kane went still. "I heard that last night." Odessa looked at him with something close to pity. "Then you'd best decide, Mr. Kane, whether you're the kind of man who ought to walk that valley alone." He walked it alone the next day. County Sheriff Nathaniel Sharp met him at the Fork and handed him a leather satchel that had belonged to Barrow, the sheriff from 1843. Most of the papers inside were ruined by damp. 3 survived. The first, dated September 14, 1843, read only, went down into the valley. Found nothing. Will not go back. The second, a letter from Reverend Tull 3 days later, read, "There is a well at the head of the valley, at the base of the North Ridge, which stood there before any settler arrived, and which the people who lived here before us would neither draw from nor fill in. Whatever your party discovered, they discovered it because that well was the last place they went. I ask you, as a Christian man and a keeper of the peace, seal it." The third, from Barrow, a week later, read, "Sealed the well. God forgive me for what I saw when I looked down." Sharp added one more paper, his own father's note from 1882, "Check the well again. Cover has moved a full inch since spring. Repaired it. Told no one." Below that, in a different hand, added later and underlined twice, "He who owes the answer keeps the count." "That's an old saying here," Sharp said. "Not in any book." Came from Reverend Tull himself. "Do you know where the well is?" Kane asked. "I know exactly where it is. I check it every October. It's the only reason I still hold this office." He said it the way another man might say, "I feed the dog." "If you're going down there, Mr. Kane, I'd ask you not to open it. I only mean to survey past it. 200 yards clearance." Sharp nodded once. "Then go with God." Kane went down. He worked his line all morning without incident, until 2:30, when he stepped out of a stand of chestnut and found the well 20 feet in front of him. It should have been 400 yards northeast. He'd marked it on his map from the description, planned his whole route around it. He shot a bearing back to his last stake and confirmed it. By every reading he owned, he was standing exactly where the well should not be. Round fieldstone, dressed smooth. An iron-banded wooden cover, sealed at the edge with cracked pitch. And on the lid, whitewash gone gray with age, the same mark. Circle. Line. 3 notches. He recorded what he saw, and walked back out at a pace just short of running. That night, Sharp told him the well had come open twice before. Once in 1871, a photographer named Corliss Vane went down with a camera and a bracket lamp to document it for a book on vanished settlements. He came back up on his own 2 feet, without his camera, his lamp, or his voice. He lived 19 more years and never spoke a single word again. His sister said that when he sat still long enough, he'd hum the same tune, over and over, one she never recognized. The photograph he'd taken, developed before the plate was destroyed, showed faces. Not looking up. Looking sideways. As if they'd turned, at the exact moment the shutter opened, to see who had come to look at them. The second opening was Sharp's own father, in 1882, at the request of a widow who'd lost her husband in that valley 12 years earlier. He lowered a lantern down a shaft deeper than any well should run, saw what waited at the bottom, sealed it again with fresh pitch, and told the widow only that her husband was down there, and that he wasn't alone. She asked him just one question before she died. How many? He answered, 62. And every year, Sharp said, the pitch cracks a little more. The cover shifts a little further. Always the same direction. Which is? Up. Kane made one decision before leaving. Look once more in daylight, then report the ground unsuitable for rail and go home. He went down alone through a mist that thickened when he walked and thinned the moment he stopped, moving against no wind he could feel. The well wasn't where he'd left it. He circled, found his own boot prints from the day before, and finally located it 400 yards north, exactly where the sheriff's directions said it should be all along. The cover had shifted. A 6-inch gap along the eastern edge, the pitch crumbled loose around the base. He knelt. He looked down. And in the stillness beneath the stillness, he saw them. Not scattered. Not fallen. Arranged, in a slow spiral descending into the dark, 62 people, hands and shoulders and the pale curve of cheekbones, the weave of dress fabric still holding its color near the top where the burial was newest. At the base of that last, freshest ring, in a gray dress with a white collar, lay a woman with her face turned upward, and her eyes were open, and they were looking directly at him. Then something moved. A shoulder near the top of the spiral shifted, the small, deliberate motion of someone who has knelt in one position a very long time and has just remembered they still can. A hand pressed flat against the stone, steadying a body for whatever came next, and from far below the reach of the light, a woman's voice, low and clear, said his name. Not the name his friends used. The full, formal name written on the railway contract he had shown no one in that town. He clenched his jaw until his teeth ached. He held the answer in his throat and did not let it out. He did not scream. He pushed the cover shut with both hands, gathered every scrap of broken pitch he could find, and sealed it again with the flat of his own knife, working until his hands were black to the wrist and the gap was gone. Then he walked out. He did not run, and he did not look back. At the fork, Sharp and Eli were both waiting. Nobody spoke for a long minute. It was open, Kane finally said. I closed it. I don't know if it will hold. Sharp nodded slowly. No man's ever closed it well enough to hold for good. It always comes open again on its own. He paused. But what saved you today wasn't the ceiling, Mr. Kane. It's that you didn't answer. If you had said one word back to whatever spoke to you down there, you would not have walked out of that valley on your own feet. That is the only rule that has ever mattered here. It's the rule Reverend Toll knew and Josiah Merrick didn't. It's the rule my own father lived by the night something at the bottom of that well called him by his given name. Kane left Ashford Notch that same afternoon. His official report to Baltimore read, terrain unsuitable for rail construction, unstable ridge base, poor drainage. Recommend alternate route. No well. No wagon. No woman in gray. He never surveyed unfamiliar ground again for the rest of his career, a strange, costly rule for a man in his profession, but one he never broke. He died in 1915. In his final days, delirious, he was heard repeating three things on a loop, 62, and I did not answer, thank God. He was buried, at his own instruction, with a pair of surveying boots in the casket. The housekeeper who prepared his body said the soles were somehow damp, and that the damp smelled of old stone and standing water, and something underneath that she couldn't put a name to. The office of county sheriff passed hand to hand across the decades, and with it, the October check on the well. Every holder of that office performed the ritual without fail, until 1947. That year, a graduate student named Marguerite Holt came through what had once been Ashford Notch, researching a thesis on vanished Appalachian settlements. She'd heard the valley's name in a letter from her late grandmother. The storekeeper told her there was no such place. She didn't accept it, and went straight to the sitting sheriff and asked again. The answer at the store is the correct answer, the sheriff told her. I'd ask you to accept it. He didn't. She spent 3 more days in that county asking questions door to door. On the 4th day, she vanished. Her car was found parked at a wire gate at the end of a dead-end road, keys still in the ignition, notebook still on the seat. No struggle. No trace. The sheriff performed the October check 1 week early that year. The log entry read, cover shifted 3 inches. Sealed. Below it, in a different hand, added later, 63. Not 62. 63. That is the last entry ever recorded in that office's log. The valley still isn't on any map. If you drive up into that country today and ask at the store in the town that wears a different name now, no one will tell you where it lies. But if you know how to ask, if you press the right way, someone will point you down a road that ends at a wire gate. Past that gate, if you go in the fall, when the light runs thin and the air goes still, you may hear it. Wheels on hard ground. The creak of an axle. A woman's voice, very low, saying something you can't quite make out. If you hear it, whatever you do, don't answer. That's the only rule. It's been the only rule since 1843, since 62 people took the easy road down into a valley that let them in, and never once let them out. If you believe the ground itself can hold a memory, that certain places keep what walked into them and refuse to let it go, tell me in the comments where you felt it. And if your own family has a story like this one, buried in a county record or a grandmother's letter, leave it below. There's a chance we read it. There's a chance the next case file on this channel is yours. This has been Cursed America. There's another file waiting. Stay close.